I'm really glad to have this conversation with my friend Jim Light, another former Marine as well. We are talking today as part of our series in What's Your Evidence, this new podcast venue that has to do with what it's like to be a Marine. And I'm thinking actually I might even interview other people from other services too, because I think it might be useful for people who are maybe family members or people who are thinking about joining the military to kind of have a better sense of what it's like to be in. So first of all, Jim, can you tell us about when you joined and why you joined?
Um, okay, I joined in 1988 out of the recruiting office in Huntington, West Virginia. Why I joined, it's a lot of different factors played into that. I was raised by Marines. My dad, my uncles were Marines. My high school football coach, my middle school basketball coach, my driver's ed teacher in high school, and my shop teacher in high school, chosen reservoir survivor. Um, so I was surrounded by Marines growing up, and the coaching with the coaches that played a big part in it because the teams I was Class A state champs for 4 straight years in high school football because that football team was run like a Marine Corps platoon. I didn't realize it at the time. But I got into college and something was just missing. I didn't have that family around me. I didn't have my guys all focused on a mission, and it just something seemed wrong. And I found that in the Marine Corps. And I suspected back then that's where I would find it. And I found it and I ran with it. Um, I served 20 years active duty, another 7 years as in an advisory role at Marine Corps Forces Special Operations Command as they were starting it up. Um, Around the world a bunch of times, every climbing place. That's what the way they advertise it, and I saw it all. So, does
So
that
you
give you
probably,
what you needed?
yeah, definitely. So, you know, a lot of times people are influenced to join a certain service because they saw a film, maybe. A lot of Marines will say, "Oh yeah, I saw Sans Iwo Jima, or I saw Full Metal Jacket or something like
Right.
that," and then from there, so they joined. But the fact that you were actually really raised by people all around you, not just in the home but also at school too, and in
Right.
sports, that gives me some insight and to another avenue for why people would join.
Right.
Yeah. And so speaking of that, were there any films actually that you saw beforehand that you thought, okay, that might be something I could do too?
Well, my dad, Full Metal Jacket had just come out in the mid '80s, and dad told me that was the most realistic boot camp scene. Of course, he went in '66. That was the most realistic boot camp scene he'd ever seen filmed. And he referred to a movie called The Boys in Company C. He said that was pretty close, but
Hmm.
Full Metal Jacket hit the nail on the head. So he mandated that I watch that.
Yeah.
But Big fan of Heartbreak Ridge, the reconnaissance movie, Clint Eastwood. But for the most part, the men that made me who I am, the men that raised me, the stories that they told, and they didn't talk a lot, but I'm from a small town. I'm from a really small town, and you could tell the community held the Marines that were there in a different stature. You could count on them. You knew that's who to call if something was that needed fixed, day or night. And that was that sets with you. You want to be that guy. At my age, and hell, I'm not even getting it all. Lloyd Gregg lived 2 doors down from me, Marine, Vietnam era. Surrounded by them, absolutely surrounded by jarheads when I was coming up, and those guys were what you thought of as men. That's it. They kind of hit the pinnacle of what it was to be a man to me at that time.
Yeah. So I think that's important to recognize, someone like myself, I grew up in the Bay Area in California,
Right.
and I wasn't really surrounded by Marines. There were, my junior high school PE coach and sports coach too. He was in the Navy, but he would talk about how he wished he had joined the Marines. And
Right,
so that was the first person I even heard mention anything of it. We went to DC and we saw some Eighth and I
right.
drill people walking by one time, eighth grade trip, and that influenced me, but really wasn't exposed to it too much. And it was just kind of the default service that I would join after I didn't do so well in college. And my dad just kind of suggested it. I'm really interested in the way in which the Marines are kind of put up on not on a pedestal, but kind of seen as, well, if you're interested in doing something that's really difficult, then go this direction. The reason I'm interested in it is because there are really difficult jobs in the other services too.
There
But
are.
there's some, right? And you've trained with those guys as well. So
I have.
it's interesting to see what would guide someone to join the other, one service over the others. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I spent 3 years on recruiting duty in southern West Virginia, actually working the coal fields down there. And family bearing has a lot of it. Uh, we had a lot of guys come in the office wanted to be Marines because they saw me in blues. They saw my other recruiters in blues, and when you're standing next to a sailor in whites, there's just no comparison. They want to be that guy. Um, but you had a lot of guys. There's no way I'm joining the Marines. It's just too tough. I can't carry that pack. I don't know how many times I've heard that. I can't carry that pack. Um, a lot of it comes down to misconceptions through the news, through movies, things like, you know, and it's like that across society. We don't see everything going on in DC. All we see is the bad stuff. And the Marine Corps is really just a reflection of society. I mean, we got our good, we've got our bad. You've got it's going to be what you make of it while you're in there. But the only thing most people see is the hardcore machine gun hanging out the side door of a Huey aspect of the Marine Corps. They don't understand that we have MPs, that we have, uh, cooks, we have admin clerks, we have guys that are they're professional strength and conditioning trainers at the gym. That's their job. Nobody told me that when I enlisted, or I'd have gone that route.
Yeah.
Um, but the other forces make uh, a a distinct effort to let them know that there's a lot out there to do in those forces. Marines, we pride ourselves on combat, so that's what even our commercials. You see our commercials, they're gunned up, they're in body armor, helmets, everything else. So that is the image we relate to the rest of the country. So if you don't want to go see combat, you don't join the Marine Corps. That was the big thing I found on recruiting duty. The guys that just wanted the GI Bill, maybe get a little travel around the world, get some experience, some leadership training, stuff like that. They didn't want to talk to the Marines because all they saw with the Marine Corps was machine guns and K bars.
Yeah, so the fact that you're a recruiter is important because you got to actually interact with people and see what their decision-making process was. That question that I had set up for you was tailor-made, I think. When were you in recruiting duty then?
I got down there in December of '95 and actually went on or actually started recruiting January '96 and left in December of '98.
Okay, yeah, actually, I got out in December 98. December 11th, 1998 was my separation date, actually, 'cause I did that first tour. So you did your first tour, 88 to 92, around there?
Yeah, well, now my first tour was Okinawa. It was a 1 year. So I got out of there in '90 and ended up in Kaneohe Bay, Hawaii with Alpha Company 3rd Recon Battalion. And I got there on June 8th and left for Saudi Arabia on August 7th. So
August
it was,
7th. There you
yeah,
go.
I barely got my boots wet in Hawaii and was on a plane to the Southwest Asia.
So you were in that first wave that went over to set up before Desert Storm.
Actually, we secured Jebel Port, where all the MSPF ships come in, and then the naval ships after them. My team, there were three teams, three reconnaissance teams went in and secured Jebel Port. So yeah, we were the first guys actually in Saudi Arabia.
So when you were on recruiting duty then, and you had parents and potential recruits talking about how they were concerned about going to combat, then it's not like you could say that wasn't the way it would be, because you ended up having to go in shortly after you overseas, that is, shortly after you joined.
Correct.
And then you went
Correct.
over several other places too.
Yeah. My grandmother used to say, if somebody threw a rock at somebody on this planet, they sent me.
Yeah.
Um, I couldn't miss a gig for anything. I was everywhere. The '90s were very busy. Um, but yeah, when the kid comes in the office, especially his parents, if you got a 17-year-old come in, and most of the parents I'm dealing with at this time are a little bit older than I am, and they were in middle school or high school during Vietnam, and they don't want to hear me tell them that he can go be a cook. They don't want to. They don't want me to explain to them about the Marine Corps band. They don't want to hear it. All they
Mm,
know is Marines come home in flag draped boxes,
right.
and it's hard to overcome. It really is. The way we overcome it a lot of times, because I'm one Marine in a 4-man recruiting station. I was the only combat arms Marine in that station.
Mm,
Birchler was a CH-53 mechanic. Jack Jones was a combat engineer, and when you say combat engineer, that a lot of stuff. He was actually a carpenter, is what he was.
mm,
And Ken Walters was a uh, dispersing finances.
mm,
He worked with numbers. None of those guys ever saw the hot end of a AK-47. Their jobs were at desks or on construction sites.
right.
So if I've got a parent that's real set on no, all Marines are combat Marines, I just bring Birchler over and say, show them how to fix a 53.
Mm,
Explain to them what you went through, and it works well. And then if they get the kid that comes in that wants to be Rambo, they send him over to talk to me. So a team concept working in the recruiting office, we can get the kid the right information, and more often than not, the parents the correct information.
right. Great. Well, and you talked about going over to the Gulf, so you were part of Desert Storm,
Desert
and were
Shield
you
and Storm. Yeah.
Shield and Storm, and then were you also over in Somalia?
Was in Somalia 4 times. Actually, I spent more time in Somalia in the '90s than I did in the United States.
Huh.
I was over there 4 different times. You see, it's funny. The news covered the SEALs landing in Mogadishu when they hit the beach. We were actually watching that from the top of the embassy.
Oh,
We'd
you were
already
already
been
there.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'd flown in a couple days before, but the big news coverage was the SEALs hit the beach there. But yeah, this Somalia a few times. Got flown down to Rwanda during the ethnic cleansing just for a set of eyes. We went down and just so we could get reports back on what was actually happening there. Bosnia, Chechnya, Herzegovina, Iraq, Afghanistan. Did a little bit of counter drug work with the DEA in the '90s. I was going a lot in the '90s. '90s were fun.
Huh. People don't think
So
about that too much.
no, they don't. Most of the things I just mentioned, your average American hasn't heard of. Really, I
Right.
mean, other than Black Hawk Down, nobody knows what happened in Somalia. And most people today probably couldn't tell you what Black Hawk Down is.
Yeah. Except, yeah, they watch the movie, and that's so powerful too, because a movie isn't going to focus on very much detail, and it's going to focus on what sells too.
Yep,
And especially that came out right after 9/11. I know that seemed to recruit a lot of people into the military.
it did.
Um, yeah, but there's a difference between. I want to talk about kind of you alluded to this before. There's a difference between expectations, and you certainly had a lot of realistic expectations because of the people that had raised you.
Right.
But a lot of people become disillusioned once they join, because it is quite different than the images they've been exposed to. How was it different for you?
It wasn't. It wasn't. We got kicked off the parade deck the first time you're doing manual arms, and we sounded like a typewriter instead of Marines doing manual arms. It was just terrible.
Mhm.
And my senior drill instructor's yelling at us, "Get off my parade deck! Get the hell off my parade deck! You no good, dirty communists don't deserve to walk on the
Yeah.
asphalt God laid on." And all I can hear is my high school football coach, because every year we got kicked off the practice field when we screwed up real bad. So my expectations were, I knew everything coming. I really did,
Mm.
but I saw a lot of guys down there that didn't, and it crushed some of them. The the difference in Marines, and you can see it out of my platoon in boot camp. We whittled it down. We started off 77. Out of that 77, 26 graduated together. So we lost
Mm.
2/3 down there. Now a lot of those other guys got hurt or something, and they graduated later. But out of that 26, 9 of us retired.
Mm.
9 of us did the 20. And we all talked about it. And had we not had the drill instructors we had down there, I don't think that would have happened. They made a difference in us. They made us believe we were brothers. We ate up all of that band of brothers stuff they preached down there because they lived it. They exemplified it in everything they did. Now you got another sister series right beside you, another platoon in your series. If their drill instructors weren't that good, those guys go into the Marine Corps with a bad taste in their mouth.
Yeah.
If they got lied to by their recruiters, and that is terrible because some recruiters they they worry about the numbers more than the man. And if you're worried about the numbers, you'll tell that kid whatever you need to do to get him to Paris Island, and then he's well. Wiggins was a world class trumpet player. He was out of uh, just outside of Syracuse. I can almost remember the name of the little town.
Mm.
Wiggins, world class trumpet player. They told him he was going to be in the Marine Corps band. Wiggins ended up at a grunt.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he went in open contract, and they said, all you got to do is get to your unit and try out for the band, and they'll suck you right in. Well, that's not the way it works. He didn't know that. He did 4 years as a grunt. He was miserable for 4 years. Got out with a bad taste in his mouth.
Yeah. Yeah. You want a guy who's going to know exactly what they're about to get into. But if you tell them too realistically, I'm sure a lot of recruiters feel, then then maybe the person's going to be dissuaded and just try and something else. But you certainly want someone who knows what they're about to get into, so they stick with it.
Right, right. Well, and
Yeah.
I talked to Wiggins. I don't know. It was probably 8, 9 years after he got out. Um, and I can't remember. Wow, I was in the airport in Atlanta, and Wiggins comes up and pushes me in the back.
Huh.
And I talking to him, and I said, "Man, that's terrible the way that happened to you." And he goes, "No," he goes, "I'll tell you what," he goes, "I wouldn't give those 4 years up for anything." He says, "Because I learned discipline and I learned to be there on time. I learned so much in those 4 years that have taken me through the rest of my life." He goes, "I was miserable. I hated those 4 years. Couldn't wait to get out. And then I realized that those 4 years set me up for the rest of my life." So even the guys that hated it, I think later learn to respect. It's kind of like your parents. Your parents
Yeah,
don't know anything when you're 18. By the time you're 28, you're thanking them for everything they did.
definitely.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's that maturity. It reminded me of there was a kid that went in with me at the same time at the same recruiting station in Northern California, and he wanted to go Intel or something like that. And they said, well, we can't secure that billet for you right away or that MOS for you right away. So why don't you go in open contract and then we can give you the test eventually. And he went in open contract, and then somewhere along the way in boot camp, they told him that he was going to go infantry, and he
yeah,
was going to be an O3, like a quarter of us were.
right,
And he was just beside himself, and he ended up actually refusing to train
yeah,
right at the what was it, the company commander's inspection. Actually,
yeah,
the company commander came up to him and asked him a question, and he said this recruit refuses to train. MPs came along eventually and removed the guy, and probably just separated him. He probably just gave him some kind of a general discharge, or I don't know
right,
what happened to him, uh, but you could tell that he was very disappointed about that. And who knows? It could be his fault, the recruiter's fault, combination of the two. But it's just
right,
an example. It ends up being a big waste of time if the person doesn't understand.
yeah.
Yeah. Because it can be serious well, it's life and death, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The difference comes down to it really comes down to research in today's day and age with the computer generation. A parent or a young man or woman wanting to join the Marine Corps, they can find about anything they want to know out there. They can look the jobs over, realize the test scores they have to make to get the jobs, and they can set themselves up to make the run into the path they want to. Back when we came in, we full metal jacket, and that's what we knew.
Yeah.
Yeah, I talked to my dad and my uncles and everything before I come in. The only thing they could tell me about was the job they did while they were in. They really didn't know much else.
Right. And that's actually what I tell people too. Sometimes they'll say, well, what should I know about joining the Marines? And I'll say, well, I could tell you what it was like in the 90s,
Yeah,
but I can't really give you an informed opinion about what's going on today. I can
right.
just tell you that you want to make sure you ask your recruiter a lot of questions, do some research on that, explore, think about something that might be interesting to you. That's something that someone told, actually, Sebastian Morris. I was interviewing him recently, and he said, yeah, I try to tell people, find something that's interesting to you before you get in. It might not even be a job that you're going to do afterwards in the civilian world, because those don't always translate.
No,
But you want to do
no,
something that
they
you
do
can become,
not.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah, how does grunt exactly translate? The discipline translate,
the
definitely.
discipline translates the concept of being able to surrounding yourself with people you trust, that translates. Um, the discipline's the big one. But how many people can do 4 years, the first 4 years after high school, and be able to talk about the time they spent in Rome? The time they
Yeah.
spent in Spain, the time they spent in Hawaii. I was 21 years old, standing on the beaches of Hawaii, coming out of Happy Hollow in Sistersville, West Virginia. It was just crazy. Um, the experience you get, and tell you another big thing: the people you meet. You draw information from the people you meet because we come from all walks of life.
Yeah.
You don't get, if you walk on the Marshall's campus, 90% of those kids are from West Virginia, Kentucky, or Ohio. They're all
Yeah.
right here regional. You walk on the Paris Island. I had a kid from Guyana, South America.
Hmm. Yeah.
Killer Khan. Yeah, you got people from all walks of life, and every duty station you go to, you get a new flex of that, and you get to see how they live, and you get to see how they were educated, which is a big thing. I thought West Virginia public schools sucked when I was coming up. Come to find out, when I got out of the Marine Corps, I wrote better than everybody else. I read
Mhm.
better than everybody else. My math skills were better than everybody else.
Yeah.
They weren't educated very well where they came from. Um, yeah, it's a world of experience, even if you never leave the United States, because you've got all these different people coming from all these places. It's
Yeah, it was always interesting to see guys from the South out at walking around Oceanside, right?
Yeah,
Near Camp Pendleton. They had their cowboy boots on and big buckles and sometimes
yeah,
even wearing cowboy hats. And they actually looked kind of out of place to me being from California. But then when you're there for a while, you go, oh yeah, there's a lot more guys like this around here,
right.
and there's room for them and everybody else. You got country music bars. And, that's the first time in my life I ever saw line dancing was in San Diego, California. At some big, country bar where they'd go in and they'd form the hats, with the
In
heat and all that.
cahoots. I bet that was the name of the
That's it.
bar.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Been there in cahoots. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, it was kind of close to the freeway from what I remember.
Yeah.
Right?
It's just off the five. Yep.
Oh, how funny. On the left-hand side if you're going south.
My my recruiter instructor when I was in recruiter school hung out there on the weekends. Big. He used to play football for Florida State. I mean, he's a great big guy, and he was from Alabama. And he told us all about it. We all went out there one night. Yeah, that's the biggest country bar I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, right. Okay, I'm looking it up right now, and it says it's permanently closed. I wonder if it had something to do with COVID, because I did see something. There's a story. Oh, there's a story from 2018 saying it's about to close.
Okay.
Yeah, so it had been around for a long time. Yeah, it's huge, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But I have to think that if it wasn't for the military presence there, both Navy and Marines, it'd be hard to imagine a place like that being so popular.
Yeah, exactly.
Probably.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's Jacksonville, North Carolina. That's about as redneck a place as you can get. I mean, it's NASCAR heavy. It's really it's a different environment, but you've got some really nice dance clubs down there because we've got all the guys from New York and Miami, and they'd come in there that expect to be able to go out and hit a dance floor on a Friday night. Um, it brings a lot to a community, and those communities are recession proof as well. That's
Yeah.
the other thing. That money's coming in regardless. It's a great place to start a business.
Yeah, you have to imagine how would North County, San Diego be, or even the southern part of Orange County too, like with Dana Point and
Right,
San Clemente and all that. What would they be like if it wasn't for Camp Pendleton?
right. They'd be non-existent.
Yeah. And of course,
Um,
Camp Pendleton then creates that big natural space between uh, southern Los Angeles area and
right,
northern San Diego. Otherwise, they say it would just be one continuous urban sprawl if it wasn't for that base.
right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it kind of transports me back every time I think about being out there and traveling around the world too. Just the 4 years I was in, I had a sea bag where I wrote all the different places I was at, and it filled up practically the whole thing just in 4 years.
Yeah, I had one of them bomber jackets from my first year in. I bought it over in Okinawa. I had the big Marine Corps Eagle Globe and anchor on the back of it, and I was putting them tabs down the sleeve. By the end of by the end of Desert Storm, I had one sleeve done, the whole length of my arm, and them little 1 inch tabs coming down all the places. You go to Okinawa, you're hitting the Philippines, you're hitting Guam. I was in Hong Kong, Thailand, Korea. You're in all these different places. Um,
And those are for training, right?
yeah, yeah, a lot of it was just for training. Yeah.
But did you also get a
Cobra
chance?
Gold Team
Oh,
Spirit. What's that?
sorry, there's a little bit of delay. Go ahead. Yeah, Cobra Gold.
Yeah, you was just asking about training. Cobra Gold Team Spirit, all those operations, Freedom Banner, you're bouncing around all over the Pacific, and they're all in some place different. So you're getting different tab for every place you go, and learning that little bit of culture when you're in those countries.
Right. Yeah, getting to spend time on ship too.
Yeah, spent way too much time on ship.
Yeah, that's one of the things they don't really talk to you about very much, at least.
Well, they used to have
Yeah.
sea duty. That's the one thing they really
Yeah.
did talk to me about when I came in,
Hmm.
because that was part of the security detachment. Was or security forces job was sea duty, and they really kind of harped that up when I was coming in, and it wasn't in the cards for me. But I know a lot of guys that did that, and then it went away.
Hmm.
They took the sea duty out because they're always running. When the Marine Expeditionary Unit became a constant on the battle groups when they went out, there was no need for a security detachment on there because you had a battalion of grunts.
Oh, I see. Right. Yeah, I knew some
Yeah,
guys that were in security forces that were on ship for the whole time for
right.
like their 2 year
Yeah,
duty. And of course, they go into port too, but
right.
um, wow. So gosh, yeah, there's so many things that we could talk about to think about how to hone it down a little bit more so that people listening to this or watching this could become educated. What do you think are some of the things that you might have done differently? Do you ever look back and say, well, I think I could have done this a little bit better, or maybe I shouldn't have done this, or anything like that? Not regrets, just
No,
lost opportunities, maybe.
I really, well, I wish I didn't like recruiting duty. I wish I would have, the Marine Corps wouldn't let me be a drill instructor. They made me go be a recruiter.
Oh,
That was on them. I didn't I put my request in and they said, no, you're going to go be a recruiter. So I went and did that. I didn't care for those 3 years in Southern West Virginia, although I did meet my wife there. So there was an upside.
mm-hmm.
But over the time, no, there's really nothing that I would change. Um, I, and I take that. It depends on what day of the week you ask me, I guess,
Yeah.
because I watched a lot of my friends, guys I went to boot camp with. Jim Freundschuh did 20 years, um, and Jim come out big as a house with 2 degrees. You know, he was an MP. He could go to the gym every day on time. He could schedule classes. He never touched his GI Bill. He did that all through tuition assistance while he was in. And at the end of his 20 years, he had 2 bachelor's degrees, could use his GI Bill to go on for his master's. And he looked like he just walked off the cover of Men's Health.
Mm,
He was in
yeah.
the gym every day for a certain time. And I kind of got envious of that at times.
Yeah.
Um, I liked my job. I loved my job. But there were certain guys I saw that they had and good home lives. You know, there's if you're a supply warehouse supervisor, you're home at 4:30 every afternoon. You know, you're in at work at 6, you're home at 4:30, your weekends are off, you never miss a baseball game, you never miss nothing.
Yeah.
Um, I got envious of those guys at times. But for me, I don't think I would change the way I did anything.
Yeah, the way, well, you were able to take advantage of a lot of opportunities that came along, right?
Yes.
Yeah, Recon Indoc comes along while you're in com school. Is that right? Out
Yep.
at 29
Communication school
Palms.
in 29 Palms. Yep.
Yeah, and then from there you get all these different schools too. You get to be part of an elite unit and do something that's meaningful
Yes.
with your time. Yeah,
And
and
built friends that I will have till the day I die.
yeah, see the
Yeah.
world,
Yeah.
and you
All the
can
good
carry
parts, all
that.
the bad parts.
You can carry all of those experiences moving forward too.
Yes. Absolutely. They make you a more well-rounded person because um, I think it helps my perspective, especially when they're talking. You're watching the news and you see what's going on in the world, whether it's on the news or whether you see it firsthand. I can understand the way the people in Afghanistan think. I understand that. I was there. I saw what they lived through. I saw what they have to work with. I get that. Africa, a lot of places in Africa, I understand that better than your average person would. And it's because of that job. You couldn't even grasp the understanding I've got as a straight up infantryman. If you were working as in a battalion, because I was embedded with these guys. When I was in Afghanistan, I was embedded with the Afghan National Army. Um, so I worked with them, not not beside or anything else. We were working hand in hand. So I got a healthy respect for a lot of the different cultures in the world, simply afforded to me simply because of the job I had.
Seems like the U.S. military has had to become more that way since 9/11 too. Ironically, right? Because we're trying to stop terrorism
Right.
abroad, but by doing that, you have to actually get to know these other cultures, and we've seen it in academia too. There's all
Yes.
kinds of new positions for people who understand the Middle East and Central Asia, North
Right.
Africa, and the military has added that dimension to its training too, and it's become much more worldly as a result.
Yeah. It has. And that's something that nobody sees. That debacle of and I'm not getting political. It was just handled wrong. The pullout of Afghanistan. Um, we left a lot of people who put their lives on the line for us in harm's way, and they were Afghan. And the problem with that is the rest of the world saw that. So now when we go into Yemen the next time,
Yeah.
Yemenis aren't going to work with us. They're not going to take our word when we say, hey, we'll take care of you. There was a lot of things that went wrong with that. Man, that one right there hurt my heart because to lose that trust on the world stage, that was bad. That's going to come back to haunt us later. I fear that will come back to haunt us later.
And that kind of seems like a theme too with the U.S. Military is that you have this difference between what's portrayed on a screen and what it's like in real life. You know, if it hadn't been on, because when that happens, of course, we saw what did happen on the
Right.
screen, right? We know that we withdrew. We know there's harm to our allies over there afterwards. We know these certain facts, but the fact that it's actually on the screen for everybody to see, it's a humiliation,
Right.
public humiliation for us, and that has tangible results later
Correct.
on too,
It
plus
does.
for the Afghans as well.
It
And for other
does.
people, as you say, Yemen, there's all kinds of potential problems out there. The Ukraine
Right.
war now might be balancing that out because we're giving all this assistance to them.
Exactly. Um, what's going on in Ukraine? It's funny. The Zelensky was up in Congress the other day talking, and I'm sitting here, and all I can think is, man, do you realize all we had to do was airdrop everything we left in Afghanistan into Ukraine, and they
Yeah.
could have beat Russia back. We left a lot of equipment in
Wow.
Afghanistan that could have been put to excellent use real quick. That I don't write the checks. I don't
Yeah.
understand how the finance works once you get up in the Beltway.
Yeah,
So
but I should say too that now that you've had these experiences around the world and you're a history graduate student, I bet while you're reading these books, like in our class, for example, and others too, you can say, "Oh yeah, now I have I can associate it with these places that I've been
yes,
because you're reading about them too."
yes,
Yeah,
and I tell you what, it's really neat to read an author's perspective on what happened there uh, versus my perspective on the ground when it was
yeah,
happening. The books on Desert Storm, and they're written, and most of them are written by guys that were there. But I was in Roswell's War; they were up here somewhere on the other tip of Saudi Arabia, and just two completely different perspectives of what was going on at that time. It's yeah, studying history it's fun. It's eye opening.
and it's an example of how joining the military can have these benefits that maybe you can't anticipate when you're 18 when you join, right? You wouldn't have anticipated that you'd have all these experiences and then you'd be able to go to college and then become a teacher later on at a college yourself and be able to include both your experiences firsthand as well as the stuff that you learn in school.
Absolutely. Anybody can say that they've read about the Sphinx. I can tell you, I stood there in front of it.
Yeah.
When you there's things I bring to the table as a teacher, or I will bring to the table as a teacher that most people don't have. Um, and a lot of it goes back to just and it's a big picture. It really is a big picture. It goes back to just the guys that I knew from all over the United States. You're teaching a class of people in Appalachia. You're sitting here in Kentucky teaching a class, but you can teach that class from the perspective of somebody that you knew from Chicago or somebody you knew from California.
Hmm.
You can bring their perspective into the way you're teaching it, because they born and raised in these mountains. Everybody sees us as something different. It's really weird. Appalachian American. Everybody refers to Appalachian American. We're not an ethnic. We're not an ethnicity.
Yeah.
This is a regional thing, but they all talk about us like we're Irish or like
Yeah.
like we're something different. Um, it's different, and to see the perspective. I got a friend from Denver still won't come to these mountains because he saw Deliverance.
Oh yeah. You say, well, that was like 600 miles south of here or
Yeah,
500 miles south there. And it was in a book too.
yeah, it was fictional. It was 600 miles south of here, and he's not coming. He says, "I'll tell you what." He goes, "I'll show up first time I hear a banjo, I'm running." you know.
Well, you might hear a banjo and being played in a local band, because we got
Yeah,
great bluegrass music around here too. It's not going to
absolutely.
be that scary tune. That well, and it occurs to me too that something that a lot of us experience in the military that is just not advertised very much is that there's a lot of cross training across cultures as well as the services too. And you've
Absolutely.
talked about that. What
Yeah,
kind of experiences did
absolutely.
you have with that?
Well, in my job, I went to jump school with the Army. I went to Pathfinder school and Ranger school with the Army. We trained inner hand with the SEALs a lot, with 75th Rangers. Trained great training with the British Royal Marines.
Mm,
Spent a lot of time with the British Royal Marines. Spent a lot of time with the Republic of Korea, Southern South Korea, the Rock Marines. Um, and it's and the Gurkhas. They're
Oh,
crazy. They're nuts. I
yeah,
like
that's
those
what I've heard.
guys.
Yeah.
They are absolutely nuts.
Thai Marines?
Yeah, worked with the Thai Marines. I only got to do that one time. Yeah, Afghan National Army Special Forces out of the 201st RCAG. And learning their cultures and the way they see things is it affect. Well, like I said, we are a reflection of our society. The Marine Corps is, and their military is as well. So it's different customs, different courtesies, different mindsets coming in from all directions, and you get to absorb all that. You get to see it in action. You get to absorb it. You get to learn the tactics. The weaponry is always cool.
Hmm.
You learn a lot of stuff on the fly that you would never have the opportunity to do. You know, being a history major in college.
Totally. And I guess if I had to ask, maybe the toughest question is that's going to come out of left field is if you had another service to join in the United States, which one would it be?
Coast Guard.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Why?
It's real world all day, every day. It's real world. That was the difference in my job in the Marine Corps and basically the rest of the Marine Corps. My job was real world all day, every day. We were
Hmm.
training, but we were a phone call away from real world right now. The Coast Guard, if you've ever looked at their boot camp's right up there with Paris Island. They
I was going to
really are.
say, that's exactly the next thing I was going to say. I've just seen a video of it before, and they're in their faces, and they're just,
Yes.
and there's a limited number of them too. There's only like 25,000 of them.
Yeah, they're very small and they are it's drug interdiction from day one. You know, you're working with Department of Homeland Security, and you're working real world problems all day, every day for your hitch. Um, Now, growing up in Sistersville, West Virginia, I didn't even know the Coast Guard did anything like that
Yeah.
when I was coming up. That may have changed my opinion when I joined the Marine. Now, it wouldn't. My dad would have whipped my butt.
Yeah. But the
But
swimming aspect is there. They're on the water all the time,
they're
just
on the
like
water
Marines.
all the time. Yeah, it's well, I didn't know that they work lakes in the United States.
Huh.
There's Coast Guard detachments all over the Great Lakes. There's Coast Guard's detachment to Great Salt Lake. There's
On the rivers
uh
too.
yeah, rivers. They work everywhere.
Yeah, we got one here in
Um,
Huntington, which is so surprising as well.
right.
They're on the Ohio River.
Yeah, the waterways. I mean, and you think about it. If you really wanted to attack the United States, the riverways is the way to do it. I mean,
Yeah.
you can get inland quickly on the waterways without being detected if there's no Coast Guard there.
Right. Oh,
So
that's a great answer. I'm gonna have to start asking that more often to people. And the fact that you answered it so quickly, you had that answer loaded. It says you thought about it before, huh?
oh, those guys saved my life one night, and I
Huh.
started researching them, and they gained a lot of respect from me. They
Oh, that's
uh,
great.
they really did. They pulled me out of the drink, yeah, on a real bad night.
Really?
Yeah, yeah, real bad night. Pulled me out of a bad parachute jump, bleeding in waters where there's sharks,
Man,
and they were on me that quick. Had me jerked out of the water and back on land in no time.
that says something about him.
It does. It does. Well, considering that happened off, I don't know how familiar you are with Jacksonville, but that happened off Onslow Beach, and they came from Emerald Isle. They had to have been screaming coming up the intercoastal waterway. I don't know how fast they were moving, but they had to have been screaming to get to me as fast as they did.
Man. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time out to talk to me today about this. It's been a real
Anything for you,
fun
brother. You know
conversation,
that.
man. I know we could be talking for hours about this, and we've had lots of great conversations at Marshall and on the phone over the years too, ever
Yeah.
since the first class you took.
Yeah.
And,
Drug
and
wars.
yes, drug wars. That's right. Well, and yeah, I hope that people who are listening to this can get something out of this talk, and just know that I think the biggest takeaway I've got from these conversations is that really you get what you put into it, and it's a super merit-based system, the Marine Corps.
It
It
is.
has its definitely has its flaws, but it's also, if you want to do something, then and you work hard enough for it and you seize that opportunity, then you'll get back what you've already put into it and more. So,
And even if you don't put a whole lot into it, you'll get back so much more.
yeah.
You really do. What you get back out of it. And you know, it's probably like that with every branch of the armed forces, and I can't speak for them, but for the Marine Corps, even if you did 4 years of the bare minimum, when you start to fill out your resume for your first job, you're going to realize how much you got out of the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I agree. And that minimum is hard still.
it
It's
is.
if you can meet those minimum standards, right? It's still
Yes,
hard
those
to
minimum
endure.
standards. You know, and it's just one last thing here before I make you let me go. You do 4 years in the Marine Corps as a supply chief, supply clerk. We do that. Get your degree while you're in. At the end of that 4 years, you've got your bachelor's degree, you've got world travel, you've got experience, you've got all the things we've been talking about for the last 30 minutes. If you go to college and get that same degree, what else do you have to go with it?
Yeah.
You really don't have anything else to go with it. You worked a job at Walmart or the 7-Eleven while you were there, something like that.
So true.
The first 4 years after high school, the Marine Corps, you get more out of the Marine Corps than you will out of anything else you can do for 4 years if you set yourself up so you can go to school while you're there.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, the last guy I talked to, he was in the reserves for 6 years, and over the time we were in, he's like, well, maybe I should, switch over to active duty or, but at the end, he said, that was the right way to go because he was able to get his bachelor's degree and his master's degree in the time he was in.
Wow.
Yeah. So it is very possible. And of course, I took 2 college classes when I was in. I could have taken more, but
Right.
that was before online classes were much of a thing. And
Right.
but I kind of I don't think I took enough advantage, and
Right.
and I probably could have.
See, I didn't have the opportunity, but I saw a lot of guys that did. And they may, it's, I don't know when they started that, probably in I don't know. I was a staff sergeant when I saw the first one. One of my sergeants come to me and said, I need you to fill this out. And I said, what is this? It was a sheet. And what it was an agreement between me and the college that he was going to saying that if something come up, I will make sure he gets the time to go take that class.
Yeah.
And it's an agreement between me, the Marine Corps, and the college, because Marine Corps is footing the bill for it, or the DOD's footing the bill for it.
Yeah.
And if they're going to foot the bill for it, they want him there. So yeah, even if we were going to the field for a training exercise, I'd have to have arrangements made to bring him back for Thursday night classes at 1800. You know, it
Wow.
was they've taken it that seriously, and that's the way. Well, that's the way you grow the best officers. The enlisted guys that got their degrees while they were enlisted and come back in as officers. So it's smart thinking, really.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah,
Yeah.
just I mean, I think that this kind of parses through a lot of the details that I kind of wish I would have researched a little bit myself. I was when I joined, I was kind of at the end of my rope where I dropped out of college after the first year, living at home with my parents, working construction, and just kind of like I got to do something.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of putty in the recruiter's hands. I said, "Hey, look,
Oh yeah.
what do you need? How soon can I join?" And literally the next day, I was at MEPS.
Yeah.
Real quick turnaround.
I'll tell
But
you, remind me sometime. I'll tell you the story about how I ended up going into communications.
well, that
That's
sounds like another good conversation, definitely.
it is. It's funny, and it happened right down the street from the school. So
And
it's
you weren't thinking about going recon at that time, huh?
oh, that's all I wanted. All I wanted was infantry.
Oh,
But well, we got a minute. I'll tell you
yeah, sure.
my test scores, ASVAB scores were through the roof. And back then, recruiting stations got big points. Everything was on a point system. Recruiting stations got big points for putting big test scores into big jobs. So I signed up infantry coming out of MEPS. I was going 03, and I was back in Huntington. I was on a 3-day bender, and
Hmm.
got a call early in the morning from a guy called Lieutenant Colonel Broderick. And Lieutenant Colonel Broderick told me to get my ass down to the recruiting station. And he sat there and he filled a doorway. I mean, he was just this huge mountain of a man, missing the bottom half of his earlobe that had been shot off in Grenada.
Ah, yeah.
And I mean, his chest, he was just this mountain of a man standing there. telling me how being a grunt was beneath me and the Marine Corps needed me to do this and do that and everything. And they wanted me to go be a helicopter mechanic or something technical. They
Mm,
wanted me into the technical fields, which that was before computers. So um and I gave in. He scared the piss out of me.
yeah.
I gave in to go into communications and thought that he figured I'd end up working in a tech van somewhere, something like that.
Mm,
Turn around 3, 4 years later, his call sign's Chomper. He is a helicopter pilot. He's a 53 pilot.
huh.
He pulled me and a couple buddies out of the drink at just outside of Somalia.
Ah, wow,
Yeah.
man. He's like, how'd you end up here? Wait, I told you to go to communications.
I said, there's a radio in my pack. We had that conversation.
Yeah,
We had that conversation. I said, you don't remember me? And he looked at me. He goes, yes, I do. He says, what are you
man.
doing on a recon team? And went from there. But yeah, that's they weren't going
Sometime
to
we'll
let me
have to
be a
talk
grunt.
about the indoc process and BRC and all that stuff, recon training, if you have the time for it.
Oh, absolutely. That's the evolution of it's fascinating, really, what it's become compared to what it was back in the day. Man, I'm sure the guys before me say the same thing.
Sure.
Um, yeah,
Yeah, I could talk about the sniper indoc and or scout sniper team platoon indoc and some other stuff, but it's we didn't get the same kind of training. I didn't go to the school itself. I just stayed with the platoon for a while.
right.
Yeah,
But
right on.
a lot of times you can pick up more hanging around the platoon than you can in the school.
Right, right. But you know, we went to a school graduation one time after those guys had been through it, and they'd all lost 30 pounds.
Yeah,
And that time, you know, it's kind of that intensity like Ranger School is, and you just go, holy cow! I mean, they look like they were ready to do anything. And the
right,
platoon, it was tough training, definitely in the platoon. You know, week long training operations, things like that, but the same, not the same level of a cauldron of trial by fire like you get in the school.
right.
Yeah. Well, for another time, definitely.
Absolutely. Anything, anytime, anywhere, Chris, you know that.
Thanks a lot, Jim.
All right, brother.
Take care.
Take care of yourself.
All right.